Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. Our mission is to see a world well led. And our strategy to get there? To empower leaders like you to lead every day. So let's get to work.
Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. I'm Randy Gravitt.
And I'm Mark Miller.
And Mark, today we are talking about one of the things that I love more than anything on earth, teams. I'm pumped today to talk about teams. We talk about this from time to time. We're going to take a little bit different slant on it today, which will be fun. Talk about some cool stuff here that maybe will accelerate some teams and help them get better. There are all kinds of teams that we all have at work. What I've noticed is most teams are not very good. But, I mean, think about some of the teams we have. We have project teams and we have, ad hoc teams, stuff we make up, like let's put a cross-functional team together or a functional team. I mean, there's all kinds. They come in all shapes and sizes. We have sports teams that listen to the podcast here. We've got all kind of people that have different kinds of teams. And yet I still see so many teams struggle. Now, teams, at least, I will say this, at least we made some progress. We at least have teams now. That wasn't always the case. There were times where we had command and control was the only really way to do stuff. You had dictators and kings and whatever making up the rules. And I think somebody somewhere along the way thought, I believe we'd be better if we would get some people together and we would decide some stuff and we could make progress. It's no question, Mark. We've seen this for years that teams always outperform individuals. And so I know this is a topic that's near and dear to our heart, but there's still a lot of awful teams. Today, we're going to try to help them get better. So if you're with me here, where do you want to take this? You got a couple of thoughts to start with?
Well, I think there are two questions that we would try to address today. The first, if teams are really so great, if in fact they do outperform individuals, why in a recent McKinsey survey did 80% of senior leaders say their teams were not high performing? Like, what's up with that? It's like this concept works. This concept enables people to accomplish more than they can accomplish individually. So why isn't it working? That's the first question. What's the second question?
Yeah, I think what can we learn from the teams that are good? I mean, are there some things that we can learn from teams that are good? Now, before we get going here, let me frame this up a little bit. We've talked about teams a lot in the past, and we won't spend a lot of time here on this, but years ago, you even wrote a book called The Secret of Teams, and we did discover that there are some focal points for high performance teams. We want to pick one of those today and want to go a little deeper on it, dive a little deeper. And I think this will help a lot of people who are listening. This may be the missing component, but let's just remind people, if you're going to have a team, it starts with what are we trying to accomplish? This idea of that it's got to be focused on results. That's to me the way I think about it. So many people just think we're supposed to have a team. Let's have a meeting. Let's get a group of people together. That's no reason to have a team. You want a team because you're trying to accomplish something and you need some people to help you. You can't do it on your own. You get enough people together or the right people together, and all of a sudden it accelerates. Performance really does go up. It's staggering.
Yeah. And that's a blinding flash of the obvious. I'm going, why in the world would you have to tell people that? Well, I lived in a world where we were trying to help people enhance their team performance. And literally people said, why are we doing this? And so we had to say, okay, it actually starts with the performance objective. You want to accomplish something. That's why you would consider building a team. The next thing that you need is pretty obvious as well, but again, I think it needs to be stated, is you really need talented people. Now, some of you are going to go, well, that lets me off the hook because our people aren't talented. Well, you need people to do this, and you would prefer talented people. And for those of you that don't feel like you have the right talent, you've got several opportunities. One is to help grow the talent you've got, and two, to actually recruit new talent to your team. I had a leader years ago telling me that he had figured out what was wrong with his team. And I was so excited for him. He didn't like my response. He said, yeah, what are you doing? Why are you excited? I said, because a problem well-defined is half solved. So what is the problem? He said, I don't have the right people around my leadership table. I don't have the right talent. And again, I said, congratulations. Now you can go to work on solving that.
Yeah, that's great. It really is true. The team, if you have a team, if you've got the best players, you really are positioned to win. This idea, we say it all the time, you want exceptional talent, not just acceptable talent. I think if anybody's listening today and you look at the people around your team table, can you get where you're wanting to go with the people that you have? And if not, you're either going to have to change the people or grow the people. I mean, it's like we can't let talent be our barrier, and yet so many times it is. So that's a good one there.
And let me say this. Let me hold on. Let me say this. You say you don't want to let talent become your barrier, but you may have to adjust your goals. If you literally don't have people that are capable, or perhaps they cannot be upskilled. I mean, people have limits. Human beings have limits. And if you want to be the best in the world at something, then you're going to have to take a hard look at your talent. So I don't want to blow by this too quickly. I know that's not the primary point of our conversation today, but who's around your table? Who's on your team? That is a non-trivial question.
Yeah, and you mentioned the next word where I was going, the next component that needs to be there before we're going to focus on one aspect today, but this other one is so important. It's the skill piece. It is like we do want to be constantly trying to level up the skills of everyone around our team table, not just individual skills. I think sometimes we think about, here's Bill on our team or Mark on our team or Randy on our team. How do I help Randy get, more skilled at whatever Randy's doing? That's part of it. But we also want some team skills. We want to be able to solve problems together as a group. We want to be able to have effective meetings as a group. A lot of things that we would say there, but those skills are important. So this idea that we've got a foundation of talent, we're trying to help them get better, focused on this result. Those things are great. But Mark, when we did all this work, we discovered that there's one aspect, and I think sometimes we forget that this is the differentiator maybe between being a really good team and what we would call a high performance team, moving to that rare air of elite. And I think this may be low hanging fruit to some people who are listening as well. This is one that is huge. And we identified it and called it, we labeled it community. This idea that we're with each other. It really does become a we deal at that point, not a me deal. And we talk about the way we care for each other and know each other and serve each other and some of those kind of things. But specifically, I want us to unpack this idea of community a little bit today, and maybe one facet of it that you might be missing in your team if you're listening today.
Yeah. And let me come back and just reiterate something you just said. Any good team has talent and skills. But if you're going to be a great team, that missing ingredient, or we've often referred to it as the turbocharger, is this sense of community. And you as a leader can strategically pursue building strong, genuine community on your team. And when you do, it's a real game changer.
Okay, so you wrote about this idea of community in The Secret of Teams, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago now. How long has it been since that book's been out? But
it's been a while.
Been a while. I mean, you've been studying teams even longer than that. And I have.
We spent almost a decade. We spent a decade studying teams before we wrote that book, because we realized, as we said in the setup, most teams flounder, but there are a few that flourish. What could we learn from them? That's what we were in search of.
Yeah. So this is interesting, Mark. So we had written about this idea of community, and then all of a sudden, a decade or so later, Google sort of validated it, right? And we didn't Google it, but Google validated it. Talk about that.
Yeah. A decade after we reached the conclusions that we have been sharing here today, Google launched what they called Project Aristotle. And some of those details, Randy. They wanted to study their very best teams and look for the practices that were transferable, because it's obvious to anybody in any organization that hopefully you've got some really good teams, but you can also observe you've got other teams that are kind of average or mediocre. You may even have some poor teams. And so they went to work and they invested a lot of time and a lot of money, multi-year study trying to figure it out. And they reached the conclusion that psychological safety was the differentiator. And I think that's interesting, and it's true, because we believe that psychological safety is a natural byproduct of community. So again, we thank Google for validating what we figured out, that if you want your team to play at another level, probably beyond what you can even imagine, you've got to create a place where people care about each other, where they serve each other, where they celebrate and mourn together. You've got to create this very special place so that the talented people can leverage the skills that they brought to the table to produce extraordinary results.
Yeah, that's great, Mark. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about psychological safety. I think this is so huge. It's been validated not just with those guys. I go all the way back to I say all the way back. I'm not sure at what point Patrick Lencioni wrote his book on teams, but remember he talked about the number one dysfunction of a team. I think 5 dysfunctions is the name of the book. 5 dysfunctions of a team. The first dysfunction was a lack of trust, and then the second was an avoidance of conflict. And I think it's because there's a lack of psychological safety. He didn't say it that way, but there's a lack of community. When we can't say what we think because we're afraid we're going to feel humiliated or rejected or laughed at or whatever, we're never going to get to where we can, and we're never going to reach our potential. Let's say it that way. If we don't have psychological safety. And I want to talk about this a little bit today, because I think there are a lot of teams out there who a lot of team members, I will say, who think I can't say what I really think, or I can't say, what I need to say. My boss wouldn't listen to that, or they're not going to, I mean, there's no avenue for that in our organization. And I think a lot of things happen when we don't have psychological safety. I want to talk about some of that and maybe some things that we can do to create it. So let's jump in here to this idea of creating psychological safety in an organization. If you're game for that conversation here, I hope you'll feel safe here with some of the things I got to say today. This will be good.
Yeah. I think it begins with knowing and being known, that you've got to be willing to share more and more of yourself over time, and others have to be willing to do the same. I believe it's foundational. Even though we're going to talk about several other strategies and tactics here today, you're not going to feel safe with people that you don't know. You're not going to build genuine community. I mean, that feels like an oxymoron, right? Having genuine community with a stranger? Well, of course not. But genuine community with someone that you know well and you know deeply is much more achievable.
Yeah, think about it, Mark. If somebody's got an issue or even something that they wanted to challenge, if I was thinking something and you had not created an environment in our relationship where I had freedom to say that, I heard somebody say years ago, it doesn't do you any good to not, I'm not sure this is good English, but it doesn't do you any good to not know what they're thinking. They're thinking it whether you know or not. So why would we not want to create an atmosphere where people could share really what they think? I will say, from the side of you need to share something, you need to say the right thing, yes, but you need to say it in the right way. You need to have some empathy, and you probably don't understand, as the person who's saying it, you probably don't understand what your leader may be carrying or the weight of that as well. So just trying to see it from both sides, I think, is important. But I think when we do create that environment where we know each other and we allow people to know us, that is really a good on-ramp to what we're talking about here.
Yes. And there are any number of ways that you can facilitate that. And I would argue that it's progressive over time. And what I mean by progressive is when you just meet someone, you're not prepared to share your hopes and dreams for the future necessarily, but you might be willing to talk about some favorite childhood memories or your favorite food or your best vacation ever. And often you'll see this in a meeting context where people are doing an icebreaker. And I'm all about icebreakers, but I'd rather use that time for community building. And you can kill two birds with one stone, right? It is the icebreaker, but when you'll ask people just to share pieces and parts of their life, over time, you can ask more challenging questions, more thought-provoking questions. And community is cumulative over time. Think of it like drops in a bucket. And over months and years and decades, you can create a very, very deep well of community just by the act, the conscious and purposeful act of getting to know someone and letting them know you.
Let me call out here, Mark, that we have two kinds of listeners here as well. We have some people that are listening today who have a results bias. Our research would show that less than 1% of people are going to be split down the middle between results and relationships. There are going to be a lot of people listening today. They have a heavy results bias. And then there are going to be a lot of people listening who have a heavy relational bias. And this may be easier, what Mark just shared there, this might be easier if you're a relational person to lean into those conversations. This might be much more challenging. And I would say to the results people, be careful that this doesn't become a project or a checklist, or you can't demonstrate care to people really unless you care for people. So if you really want to know the people on your team, that's a great place to start. And they may push some of you. You may be an introvert. Yeah, I mean, whatever. We're all kind of different personalities here, but I think this is important for us to really think, do I want to have a team that's going to go to its highest level? And if so, I'm going to have to create an atmosphere where we really do care for each other. And I think that starts a lot of times with the leader modeling the way. People, you say it all the time, Mark, people always watch the leader. And maybe this is a place where we're going to have to push ourselves out of our comfort zone a little bit as well.
Well, and I think some people will, but here's my 2 cents worth. And I don't know if you and I have ever talked about this. The leader sets the strategy. And if the leader has set a strategy for building a high performance team, community is a non-negotiable. And I've actually relieved people from my team in the past who said, I don't want to be part of this. I don't want to be part of community. And again, that's at their discretion, but you don't say, okay, we're not going to become a high performance team because Sally doesn't want to be part of the community. You got to find somewhere else for Sally. Community is not an option if you want high performance. Psychological safety is not an option if you want high performance. And so you can't force people into community. You can only invite them, but you can make it so enticing that they want to join.
Yeah, and I think that's great, Mark. I would say if I create an environment of psychological safety, so many good things really do happen. Let's think about a couple of the benefits of that. I'm going to create an environment where people are willing to take more risk. You do not want an environment where nobody would ever take a risk. You don't want an environment where everybody would be afraid to fail. I mean, so much of our progress is through our failure. What's the old, I heard somebody say this, I'm not sure if I read it on a tweet or whatever years ago, but somebody said, if you're not failing about 20% of the time, you're probably not growing. And I know some failures are catastrophic, and we certainly shouldn't be trying to fail on purpose, but I think we should create an environment where people are willing to break stuff and learn how to fix it, so to speak. It's almost that software engineer. I got a son-in-law who's a software engineer, and he said, like, man, we're breaking stuff all the time, almost on purpose, because we learn every time we do. And it's amazing what gets created in the technology world. I think some of that could pull over into the business world, where we could say, let's try something, see what happens, and learn from that. But if so-and-so, doesn't get everything perfect every day, it doesn't mean that they can't be a part of the community. I mean, we gotta pick people up when they fail. We need to create opportunities for them to fail, if you ask me. So, okay. Another thing that happens when we create psychological safety is, I would say, learning goes up. We learn more, growth, it accelerates growth. I mean, so many good things happen when we create this environment where people are free to do their best work. And if it's not good enough, be coached, be corrected, be accountable, all that stuff. I mean, it's just a lot of good stuff versus we create an environment where everybody's afraid, they're walking on eggshells, and I think we never make the progress we can. So this is huge. What you're talking about, this is a big deal.
No question. And it's discretionary, right? You don't have to do these things, but when you choose not to pursue genuine community, you are choosing to sub-optimize your performance. Again, I'll go back to where we said a few minutes ago, this is the differentiator. And here's why this, I'm not trying to project, but I've talked to tens of thousands of people about this over the years. What we're describing is so rare, most people have never experienced it. And when I was talking to John Katzenbach, he and Douglas Smith wrote a book called The Wisdom of Teams. And that was part of the catalyst for us to pursue this, is that they said, based on their research, that only once in a career would someone be on a team like we're describing. And I sat down with John and I said, John, I understand the power of this dynamic that you're describing. I said, we call it community. He didn't even have a name for it. And I said, and I also have got to challenge the premise once in a career. I would say once in a career if left to chance. But if a leader will be strategic and they'll be purposeful, we have a batting average of probably north of 90% of the time. We can create this element of community that actually takes performance to another level. But it's at the discretion of the leader. Does the leader want to create a high performance team? The team's not going to drift there. No team is going to drift to greatness. They've got to be led there.
Yeah, I think that's a good reminder, Mark, that we really can't get to where we want to go or reach our potential if we don't do what we're describing today. It's just not going to happen. You can't, you're going to sub-optimize your team if you think this is just a bunch of mamby-pamby soft stuff. I've had so many people, when we start talking about this in a workshop, they'll come up and at the end of the day and think, man, I thought when you started talking about this stuff, it felt like we're going, we're talking about building community and all this and knowing each other and loving each other. And I've had leaders literally tell me, I thought that was so, such a waste of time. And yet, because I labeled it as soft stuff. And then at the end of the day, they'll say, that's actually the hardest thing that you said today for me. I need to work on that the most, kind of thing. Because I think so many times as leaders, we're charging the hill and taking the mountain or whatever. And if we're not careful, we can get there and our team is not with us. And that's really just, that's not the way it's designed to be. And if you just want to focus on results only, the research it's just not even close. It is going to suffer. Your results are going to suffer if you don't have this together we mindset. And it really is just a bunch of lone rangers. It's really not going to help you get to where you're trying to go. So I think that's a really good call out.
There, the reality is you're not going to get to where you want to go unless your team goes with you. The world's just too complex. The mountains are too high. The goals are too challenging. You're going to need the team to get there.
Well, I think you and I both would say if you can get to where you're trying to go by yourself, it's probably your dream is probably not big enough, right? You're right. Probably not thinking big enough. You're going to need people to help you go to where you're trying to go. That's a good call out. All right. Where else you want to go here?
Well, just another element that I would suggest will help build this dynamic we're discussing and fuel psychological safety is if you look for and create opportunities to serve each other, to serve and be served. And you may be thinking, well, what's that look like? Well, how much time have you got? It could look like a million different things. It's when someone is struggling with an assignment of coming alongside them and saying, how could you help? I had the privilege to spend some time with Lou Holtz a few years back, a former coach, several winning college football teams, including a national championship at Notre Dame. And when he went to South Carolina, They had, and I want to say it was 15 consecutive wins. It was split over 2 seasons, but it was quite a run. And he made a lot of press because this was after his Notre Dame days. And I said, let's talk about that. Well, to summarize a delightful conversation, he stumbled upon this idea of community. And he said he had been coaching football the same way since the 1960s when he was in Arkansas. He knew you had to have talent. He knew about skills, and he'd been teaching skills pretty much unchanged for decades. But he realized that when you help a team build this dynamic, this community and psychological safety, their play would go to another whole level. And one of the things he talked about was mining for and probing for opportunities to serve each other. He said he ended every practice by bringing the team together and saying, how can we serve each other in this moment? And somebody would say, I need a ride. Okay, where are you going? He'd find him a ride. Somebody else would say, I've got a math test tomorrow. And he'd say, does anybody here know how to do math? And everybody'd laugh, and he'd say, okay, what kind of test is it? Who can help him study tonight? And he said he was always trying to facilitate service among his team members. Well, again, that's another key strategy for building community. So we have been encouraging teams to do this for literally decades. Be on the lookout. Look for, search for, and create opportunities to serve each other. And only good things come from that.
Yeah, Mark, it's interesting. I've worked with a bunch of sports teams through the years, and I've had multiple conversations with athletes who would say, you know, when my career ended or when my career was about to end, I realized that what I was going to miss the most was not to chase for the trophy, whatever sport it was, but it was going to be my teammates. And it was those relationships and that bond that we forged that was actually propelled us a lot of times to be more successful than we probably would have been had we not been together. So I love that mindset. I think that's so, you know, that we serve each other, that we care about each other, that we know each other. Those things are so good. I mean, it's just a great reminder.
Yeah. And I think the last thing I would suggest, again, that the leader needs to take point on this, but to search for and to seek out opportunities to celebrate and mourn together. When people have something to celebrate it as a team. When people are on hard times, come alongside them as a leader, come alongside them as a team. And again, I think people will be talking about those types of those moments for the rest of their lives when their team members came around them to celebrate and to mourn. It's really powerful to build the kind of place that we're talking about.
Sounds like a fun team to be a part of for sure. I will add one more little thought here, actually based on a meeting you and I had with some guys this morning, and a guy made a statement. I think it kind of ties in here. He was talking about the idea of love, and this is so good. He said when people feel listened to and they feel loved, he said, actually, when you start listening to somebody, it's hard to distinguish between listened to and loved. And I'm not sure exactly the way he said it, but that was basically the point was when a person feels listened to, they feel loved. And I think so many times, a lot of what you're describing there, it comes from us just paying attention and hearing what the other person is saying and allowing them to, you know, the old weigh in leads to buy in. A lot of times we allow them to weigh in on decisions and circumstances and problems and, you know, those kind of things. There's no reason for us to not have an environment of psychological safety, an environment of community. This is so, it just feels like low hanging fruit to me. But if a leader doesn't put any time on it or put in, you know, place any stock on it, you know, so to speak, they're never going to become the team that they could be. And that really does go back. It's a leadership issue, Mark. At the end of the day, it always goes back
totally
to the leader.
It's totally a leadership issue. So let me share a tactic that came out of the Google study. when they were really trying to figure out how do we discern the functionality of a group. Yes, we can look at the data, we can look at the scorecards, but how do we tell how much psychological safety is there? And they said, you can tell based on how many people participate. Does everyone speak in a meeting? Because if people don't feel safe, if people don't feel like they're part of the community, you're not going to hear from them. And so I just thought that was a really good challenge to us, even though we've been on this journey for decades. When we're in a meeting, let's pay attention. And yes, there may need to be some facilitation there where you would call on someone who would be a little more introverted, maybe a little more shy, and say, hey, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? And they can still take a pass and say, I don't have anything to add. Well, that's great. We're not asking them to talk just to talk. But if you have good facilitation in community, those people have thoughts and they have a point of view. And so I would encourage you to observe the behavior in your next meeting and see, is it dominated by just a few folks? Or in fact, does everyone participate? And that'd be a real clue, maybe as to your starting point on this journey of community building. And assuming you have community, don't miss something that we said earlier. It's cumulative over time. And the more you do these things, the deeper that bond and that unity, and the stronger that psychological safety will become.
I like what you said there, Mark. If we're in that next meeting and let's say you're leading the meeting and I'm not participating or you don't hear from me and you say, hey, Randy, tell me what you think here. You just literally said, I know you, I want to hear from you. You created psychological safety just in that question. So yeah, I love the idea of paying attention in the meeting. So anybody listening, the very next meeting you go to, who's leaned in? I was watching a baseball game over the weekend, this last weekend. There was a big game going on with the Braves, and I noticed that both of the teams were up on the top step of the dugout, leaned into like it got down to this moment, and everybody's engaged. I mean, there's nobody sitting in the back of looking for the sunflower seeds. They're all up on the top step looking in. I think that's a good picture of what engagement looks like. You go to your next meeting and you've got two people that are dominating, taking up all the airspace, and you got 4 or 5 people that are not, they're just not there. They're on their phone or, whatever. As a leader, we got to see that. We got to call that out. So that's a great tactic, Mark. I think there's a strategy we could give people too, a strategic way to think about this that would maybe even be a little broader, but to go back to where we started today, and you may want to do some evaluating. Do you have the right results that you're chasing as a team? Have you identified those results? Would everybody around the table say, these are the results we're trying to get? And then do you have the right people? Let's go back to the talent and are you doing everything you can to level them up? But ultimately, if you've got talent and skills focused on results and you're missing community, don't expect to be more than a good team. You really are never going to get to that place of being elite, rare air of high performance that we call it, without genuine community. So this is huge. We all have an opportunity to create more psychological safety. It's not enough to say, well, we have enough. You want to do everything you can to knit the hearts and minds and the work of those people together. And if you can do that, I think your team can be extraordinary. And that really is the goal. So I'll leave it there today, Mark. You got a final word? Anything from you? You good?
Yeah. The best work of your life will happen in the context of a team. So make it great.
So true. All right. You be great today. Everybody listen. Hope you'll share with your friends and family. Continue to let us hear from you. I'd love to have a comment or anything you got there. Comment on the YouTube channel. Whatever's going on, we hope you'll continue to pursue your very best. Remember, the best leaders lead every day.